The first CHIMURENGA, the causes of the first CHIMURENGA, loss of land. The land issue is central to the history of Zimbabwe, and it is too central. Very large tracts of land were appropriated to the whites without purchasing money in 1890. The alienation of land was done without the permission from the Sauna chiefs. White theory was that the land in Mashonaland could be granted by the company, that is BSAC, as concessionaries from Lobengula. However, the Sauna chiefs did not regard themselves as subject to Lobengula. It can be pointed out that one of the cherished rights of Africans was the right to allocate land to their subject. This right was dishonored and induced hatred of the colonial system. Chiefs therefore started to be hostile to the whites. For example, in Maungwe, Anglican missionary was not allowed to enter into the kraal in 1892. White men were his enemies, says Chief Makon. They had killed some of Mangwende's people and outraged the women. This was punishment for denying white men's rights, prompted by the Rand concession. Armed raids could have often performed these oppressive practices. It can therefore be said that the Africans became squatters in their own land. Forced labor. The BSAC introduced the tax in 1894 to force Africans to go and work on settler farms and mines. Hard tax was to be paid in cash and not in kind. This was hoped that Africans would be forced to work in order to get cash. This is often referred to as proletarianism, making someone become a worker. Cattle were taken by force to force Africans to become the white man's laborers. Africans were flattened. They were compressed, packed down using sjambaks. In addition, they were given orders in English. Such treatment did not go down well with the Africans. Hence the risings, loss of cattle. This grievance was felt more in Matabeleland than Mashonaland, because the former was known to be a cattle zone. So soon after their victory, the settlers took Ndebele cattle numbering 250,000. This drastically reduced the Ndebele head, and the latter wanted their cattle back, as it was their backbone of their livelihood. Taxation. An array of taxes was introduced mainly to force the Africans to become the white man's laborers. Quite a number of taxes were introduced by the white men to force Africans to become laborers. Some historians say the last straw came with the demand for the payment of our tax in 1894. It was now not clear to the chiefs, since it could mean one thing: they were underplayed their chiefly right to sanction the controlling of trade and the granting of land. Traditionally, paying of tribute gave the chief or king dignity or respect. So with the coming of the whites, they were now subject to white supremacy white ascendants. However, unlike the Ndebele, some chiefs demanded tax in 1890. There is much evidence of this in the files of the South Rhodesian Native Department of 1894. Some even warned the messengers, revenge if the system continues. Kundri Nyandoro refused to pay because these men were armed due to Portuguese trade. So this caused the settler messengers to be armed with Martin rifles and ball cartridges. This collection of tax threatened political independence of chiefs. Mashona people were often angered by the collection of tax, which usually caused the seizure of cattle and sheep. Prices of livestock and grain were kept low to encourage families to choose members to work on mines and farms. For example, 80 cattle and 44 goats fetched only 146 pounds in 1895 in Chata or Chivu district. In 1894-1895, tax collection was intensified. It was heaped on. It was piled. Some livestock were hidden so as to flee away from this draconian practice. Native Department took 17,350 livestock and 4,500 small livestock. The Shona suffered this robbery, and it only helped to induce anger and hatred to the white settlers. To increase the company income, taxes became a burden, became a liability or an obligation in the Africans, making them more determined to get rid and exonerate themselves, hence their risings. Abuse of Ndebele women. Abuse simply refers to cruelty, ill-treatment, violence, neglect, exploitation, or insults. Policemen, both white and Shona, abused married and unmarried Ndebele women. The employment as policemen of their former subject, the Shona, did not please the Ndebele. It is clear, however, that the settlers were now using divide and rule tactics to entrench themselves in Zimbabwe. Trade. The BSAC now monopolized trade. This did not go down well with the Shona, who found trade with the Portuguese fairer and more lucrative than, say, trade with the BSAC. The whites were now taking advantage, exploiting the Shona, thereby making a lot of profits, unlike the Portuguese, who were a bit fairer, and trade with the Portuguese was beneficial. Loss of independence. Independence refers to self-government, autonomy, self-rule, self-determination, freedom, objectivity. Objectivity is when you say whatever you want truthfully. The Ndebele lost their independence after the 1893-1894 war. They were not allowed to choose another king. It was not objective for them to choose another king after the 1893-1894 war. This power vacuum was resented by the Ndebele. Mostly the traditional powers of the chief were taken over by the settlers, leaving the leadership powerless. They also lost their respect they used to enjoy in the society. Settler brutality. Although magistrates or law lords had been appointed in various districts to administer justice, there was little justice. Africans were ill-treated, especially at mines and in farms. In the use of land, Shamboko or Chamboko in Shona was very common, and the Africans resented this abuse of authority. Oppressive system. The system was very cruel, was very harsh, was very unfair. Native departments affected the Africans most. It intervened in the African politics and disputes, paralleling the work of African rulers, probably the divide and rule policy which was practiced in India. To do this, they were armed. They could appoint political stooges, political fools, political puppets as chiefs. They were people favorable to them. It was a big annoyance, a big exasperation to the Shona and Ndebele. Zeal for revenge. The incompleteness of the conquest of the Ndebele nation in 1893 caused the resentment to start another war. Powerful regiments like Ihati, the Isukumani, the Imbizo were not completely beaten off in 1893. But their regiments were formed to protect the Ndebele nation, and they did not take part in the Battle of Shangani and Bembesi. Some built a superstitious awi that they should dismantle in bits and pieces once and for all the British hegemony and expel white intruders. These warlike regiments were daily reminded how bad the whites were, and they were also reminded that they are now performing the work that was supposed to be done by their slaves, that is the Shona. In fact, these were a mixture of Ngwato laborers from South Africa and Shonas. So they felt bitter to be controlled by their own dogs, the Shona. Natural disasters. Natural calamities, natural disasters or catastrophes occurred in 1896-97. Natural disasters occurred in Zimbabwe, and these include drought, rinderpest, cattle disease, and locusts. Africans gave a religious interpretation to these misfortunes. They gave a religious construal, and they argued that the whites had angered their ancestors, hence these natural disasters. So they saw it worth to fight the white men in order to end the natural disasters, and the opportunity to fight the white men was presented when Jameson entered Transvaal to raid the Boers, leaving Matabeleland with fewer police officers. The Ndebele had to exploit the chance, and they had to charge the Rhodesians, and the first CHIMURENGA or UMVUKELA started. The Shona joined the war in June. My name is Calvin Trevor McCormick. I'm a history pundit.